I am still Chris Hayes, sitting in for Rachel Maddow, who is, we hope, relaxing somewhere. As increasingly insane as the world appears to be getting, from the Korean Peninsula to the Tea Party's apparent influence on a TV dance contest, Thanksgiving is nearly upon us, and there is more to be thankful for that we probably allow ourselves to appreciate every day. In the case of some Americans, a little gratitude seems particularly timely. More on that in about a minute. We begin tonight with President Obama on the road.
We made the decision to stand with you because we had confidence in the American worker, more than anything. And today we know that was the right decision. We know that was the right decision. So here's the lesson. Don't bet against America. Don't bet against the American auto industry. Don't bet against American ingenuity. Don't bet against the American worker. Don't bet against us. Don't bet against us.
President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden traveled to Kokomo, Indiana today to visit a Chrysler plant that was shut down when the company declared bankruptcy last year and then later reopened after the federal government stepped in to save the auto industry. It might be a little hard to remember with scenes like this one today, but the auto loans pushed through by President Obama and Democrats in Congress last year were incredibly unpopular at the time. Remember how much grief the president took for trying to hoist the entire American auto industry on his shoulders? Remember how mercilessly he was mocked as the car dealer in chief?
If you buy a car from Chrysler or General Motors, you will be able to get your car serviced and repaired just like always. Your warranty will be safe. In fact, it will be safer than it's ever been because starting today, the United States government will stand behind your warranty.
The decision to invest in the auto industry came at enormous political cost for President Obama. But ultimately, it more or less worked. I mean, it benefited both auto workers who didn't lose their jobs and big business. All three American auto companies are now profitable again. This is good news, right? And on the same day that the president traveled to Indiana to hail the comeback of the American auto industry, there was yet more positive news concerning America's slow but steady economic recovery. It turns out the U.S. economy actually grew at a faster pace over the summer months than was previously estimated. The numbers still aren't great, but for those of you keeping score at home, that's 5 straight quarters of economic growth. Thank you, economic recovery package. But wait, there's more. Did you see this headline in the New York Times today? Corporate profits were the highest on record last quarter. Quote, American businesses earned profits at the highest figure recorded since the government began keeping track over 60 years ago. Now, that statistic is a touch misleading because it's not adjusted for inflation, but corporate profits are going gangbusters right now. Here's probably the most accurate way to measure it. This is corporate profits as a percentage of U.S. economic growth over the past 3 decades. There are a lot of numbers here, but here's what's important. This big dive right here is the Great Recession. Corporate profits plummeted to nearly their lowest point ever when the recession hit. But here's where we are now. Corporate profits are nearly at their highest point as a share of GDP ever. Things have recovered for corporate America much faster than anyone really anticipated, and much faster than they have recovered for average workers. For bankers and CEOs, the boom times are back. So, given all this data, given the fact it's the holidays, time to give thanks, you would think that the corporate titans of America, who have benefited so disproportionately from the president's policies, from policies the White House has undertaken under great political cost to themselves, you would think that these corporate titans would take a moment to give thanks. If you thought that, you would be dead wrong. On the same day that this headline appeared in the New York Times, corporate profits were the highest on record last quarter, here's the headline that appeared in Politico. Business, Obama outreach not enough. In an article that will make you want to throw your laptop across the room, business leaders are now complaining that President Obama, quote, needs to drop the name calling, try to see their point of view better, and step up with some specific proposals. After reaping record profits over the past 2 years, business leaders are now essentially demanding total, abject capitulation from the White House. Whining about President Obama's tone, whining they don't get to bring foreign profits back to the United States under really low tax rates, whining the ways of choosing corporate boards were changed by the Wall Street Reform Bill. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to America's ingrate ruling class. The same business leaders whose bacon was quite literally saved by the policies of this White House are now busy relentlessly attacking this White House. They're busy secretly funneling millions upon millions of dollars into organizations in order to attack the president and his policies. Remember, in the run-up to the midterm elections, corporate America threw a full-fledged hissy fit. The Chamber of Commerce spent around $30 million attacking Democrats and the White House for too much government interference in the private sector. Millions of dollars that were, to some degree, earned off of an economic recovery largely produced by the government. Just so we're clear here, the government steps in and bails out the banks. The government steps in and passes an enormous recovery act, a recovery act the Chamber of Commerce endorsed at the time. The government steps in and saves the auto industry. All of these policies lead to recovery, economic growth, and record profits for corporations. And those corporations then take that money and sink it into ads attacking the president and his party for being anti-business. And because of all that whining and complaining, they get news coverage like this.
President Obama is offering an olive branch to the business community in an effort to smooth over some bad feelings.
You've got basically an anti-business environment right now.
Does he need to change his strategy, his approach with the business community?
Too little, too late. The president extending his hand to the business community as he starts wooing the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. But will he listen to anything they say? Or is it all just business as usual?
You can say all you want about this president and his policies. One thing you cannot accuse him of, at least with a straight face, is being anti-business. In 2009 alone, President Obama and Democrats passed 11 separate tax cuts aimed at American businesses. That giant recovery act included millions of dollars in investments in green technology and the like. The president lobbied Congress for months to pass legislation establishing a small business lending fund, something that was endlessly delayed by Republicans. Before the midterm elections, the president laid out another $100 billion of additional tax credits for businesses. And for all of that, after pocketing record profits, American business leaders now say it's not enough. President Obama must do more. Here's the thing. Big business should really be careful what they wish for. The recovery money that President Obama and Democrats passed last year is now running out. That much maligned recovery package has put money into the pockets of average Americans who might otherwise be unemployed. Money that those people can now spend on goods and services. But after spending months and months and millions of dollars attacking the president and congressional Democrats, big business now has a brand new Republican Congress that not only won't vote for any additional recovery dollars, but wants to pull back the rest of the recovery money that hasn't been spent yet. It might be fun to run to the pages of the Politico to attack the president and his, quote, anti-business policies. But big business might soon look back on this moment and realize they never had it so good. Joining us now is Heather McGhee, director of the Washington office of Demos, a nonpartisan public policy research group that advocates for a more equitable economy. Heather, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you too, Chris.
Okay, real talk here, Heather. Did that Politico article also make you want to throw your laptop across the room?
It's really one of those only in Washington sort of bizarro world scenarios in which you've got 15 million people out of work through no fault of their own. You've got millions of Americans wondering about how they're going to make their mortgage payment. You've got banks just raking homeowners over the coals through what we're learning is really massive fraud. And yet the question of the day is how much better can we treat American corporations? It's really flabbergasting. Now,
do you think, I mean, on the substantive case of this, do you think the president has to apologize for businesses? I mean, what do you think the sort of substantive case is in terms of whether the policies have been good for them or not?
I mean, I think all you have to do is look at the numbers. $1.6 trillion in 3 months, the highest corporate profits in recorded history. Of course the president doesn't have to apologize to big business. The president may have to have a summit with big business, and I think it'd be great for him to bring the corporate titans of America into the White House as the sort of political elites are talking about right now. But I'd want to make a little tweak to the agenda. I'd want there not to be any sort of apology or olive branch, but a demand that the biggest corporations in this country actually plow some of that hoarded cash and profits back into hiring the American people again. We need to get Americans back to work.
And that's exactly the irony. I mean, what we're seeing with these profits, right? I mean, the problem exactly is that it is, as you say, being hoarded, a la hoarders, that the money's being hoarded and it's not being plowed back in, it's not being invested, and we're not seeing an expansion of investment and employment, which are the things that really matter to average Americans. How do we make that start to happen? That seems to be the nut to crack in terms of getting a more robust recovery.
I mean, what we've seen is a real departure between the fates of Wall Street and Main Street, between the fates of the people who work in corporate boardrooms and the people who work on the shop floor or who would be desperate to get a job on the shop floor. So as long as that's the case, the president has a real risk here when he listens too much to the Washington Beltway buzz that's really planted by corporate lobbyists about, you know, the olive branch and is he anti-business and all of that, because you can very much lose focus on what really matters in this country, which is the fate of the middle class. If President Obama is not waking up every single morning and saying that the most urgent economic problem is the decline of the working and middle class in this country, then he is absolutely missing the boat. I believe that he does that. I believe that that's where his heart is. But it's really difficult here in Washington to keep your focus on what's going on actually around kitchen tables across America.
And I think one of the interesting things here, we're sort of running a natural experiment now that we have or an unnatural experiment now that we have the Republican control of the Congress, in that the things that were the steps that were taken for recovery are the things that Republicans got elected on opposing, right? And the question, I think, is to what degree do you see going forward the fates of Main Street and Wall Street tied together, and to what extent are they going to continue to be separated? Is it possible, without future recovery dollars, for big business to keep reaping these kinds of profits?
I think it is possible. I think that we're going to see. I mean, we saw even in boom times, even in sort of even before the Great Recession, we saw that inequality was this yawning gulf. As long as we're not investing in infrastructure and early childhood education, in basically rebuilding America and shoring up the middle class, as long as we don't have trade policies that work for the average worker, as long as we're not really seeing the words "Made in America" again, we could obviously see companies like ExxonMobil, which do great even though the average American worker isn't doing great, that pays zero taxes. GE, which actually got $1.1 billion in tax benefits last year. It exploited so many loopholes. As long as we see that the tax policy, the trade policy, and our global labor policy is so skewed towards the biggest multinational corporations, I actually do think that we can see a lot of benefits still for corporate America, and none of that trickle down to working people.
I should note a disclaimer. GE, of course, is the parent company of MSNBC, the network on which we are now appearing. Heather McGhee, but thank you for calling that out. Heather McGhee is the director of Washington office of the nonpartisan public policy research group Demos, and it's always a pleasure. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you, Chris.